3, 2, 1. This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell from deep in the Texas Hill Country.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our friends and sponsors and hopefully someday friends like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover a wall around Trump, our 2019 predictions, and the 2018 year in review. And, of course, we'll end the show with Out of Left Field. Let's get right into it. You know, we were off last week. Two of us got sick. Andy threw a party for us, a Christmas party, and rumor has it that it was her hot chocolate that got two of us sick. I don't know if that's true or not, Chris Bell, but that's been the rumor going around.
Well, I had the hot chocolate, and I felt like a champ all week.
Didn't you say something about hot chocolate coming out of both ends?
Stop.
It was coming out of it was bad.
He said
It was
that
bad.
was way too much
way
information.
Farther than, Oh, okay.
From now on, let's just have a policy, I'm sick.
Yeah.
Well, that'll
Yeah.
do.
We don't even need to talk about that.
It was enough. That was enough.
But I did have a nasty lip fungus that I wanted to talk to you all about.
It
We
is.
should totally start over.
I really wasn't going to go that far with that. All right, let's move on. A wall around Trump. Now that we've talked about everything else, a wall around Trump. As 2018 grinds to a close, the U.S. government has ground to a stop. The partial closure of the government will run into 2019 with no end in sight as both sides have dug in. This is an issue of Trump's own making, and it continues to spiral out of control. The budget battle seemed all but closed when Donald Trump pulled the plug. All right, I'm going to try that again. The budget battle seemed all but closed when Donald Trump pulled the plug on a deal he'd already signed off on for a continuing resolution to fund the government until February 2019. Why, you asked, did he do that? Because Ann Coulter, Rush Limbaugh, and a few other right-wing pundits called him a weenie and said he was backing out on his promise to build a wall and he was not being a true conservative. That is exactly what happened, and that's the only reason we're having this battle today.
And dumping thousands of people in the grease as a result.
Right.
Yeah, I usually don't pay too much attention to government shutdowns because they're theater, political theater anyway. And usually nothing too bad happens. All essential employees are at work. And then after a few days, everyone goes back to work and they get their back pay and everything's good. This time feels a little bit different. I feel like there are, the concern amongst government employees themselves this time seems so much greater than in previous times. I think that people feel like we have a very unpredictable president, and he doesn't really care about how it affects people's lives, and he will take it to the extreme.
You know, James, it would be one thing if this was a budget battle that was based on principle and not a budget battle that was a made-up issue designed to make President Trump look like he was fighting for something.
You can't use principle and President Trump in the same sentence, Chris. That's just oxymoronish to do that. I agree with Andrea, except for one thing. I think it's, and Chris, you can correct me on this, I think it's at the discretion of Congress whether or not they get retroactive pay. And so it's not a guarantee that they're going to get retroactive pay. But what really makes this, in my mind, just a terrible thing to do is Trump is basically grandstanding, as Chris Tritico suggested, for his base and for the conservative media. He wants this wall, and if I'm the Democratic Congress, I'm not giving him 1 cent for this. They should hold their ground until the new Congress starts on January 3rd, and then make some decisions. And on top of that, as you see, Chris, Trump is trying to make Nancy Pelosi the boogeyman in this thing because he wants to try to pit Schumer against Pelosi, but that's not going to work. You know, we all see through that game, and I think Trump is going to lose on this.
But the thing is, he really doesn't want the wall. He just wants the fight about the wall because he had already agreed to a continuing resolution that would have put the Democrats in control of Congress, of the House, before the budget battle took effect again. And it only became a fight when the conservative media started calling him a weenie.
Well,
and that's the only time he started fighting.
And I don't know if he wants the wall or not, but the wall is a stupid fucking idea, and James is exactly right that the House should hold their ground. The Democrats should hold their ground because it's a huge waste of money, and we just don't need to go there. And I think Andy's right that it is theater, but government shutdowns should have never become a bargaining chip
Right.
to begin with.
And
this
he
has
made
been
it
going on for years and years now. Well, going back to Newt Gingrich, and it's terrible public policy. And I wish they, act like grown-ups and work something out. And basically what Trump is doing here is acting like a little kid. And since he hadn't gotten his way, he's going to take his ball and go home. But unfortunately, he's hurting so many people in the process, and and it's usually little things, Andy. I think you're right to a certain point. The damage is never all that severe, but I think it creates a major inconvenience in a lot of people's lives.
James, you just said that the funding, the back pay, is up to Congress. Well, they have to when they pass the new budget deal, they have to put back pay in there. I've never seen it happen where they wouldn't, because no Congress has the guts to say we're not going to give you the pay that you didn't get because we shut the government down. So I don't think that's really an issue. But here's the real issue here. Go ahead. Go ahead, James.
I'll go ahead.
You are probably right about this, but we've never seen a Congress and an administration like this, Chris. And the thing that's really getting me is the spin that the Trump administration is coming out with daily. For instance, he's making it most government workers are Democrats. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know that at all. But he's trying to play this base, and that's the thing that's so disgusting, is that you have lives of people hanging in the balance. I was looking at several stories today about, a single grandmother that's supporting her two grandsons, and, she has no money to pay the bills and to support these kids. In the meantime, Trump is going to go to Mar-a-Lago and hang out with his rich friends and do what he needs to do. And you got people who really are hurting, and he does not get that.
Well, that's the point that I was going to make. When I talked about essential services going on and the general public is only minorly inconvenienced, but for people who aren't getting a check and start spending down their savings and start living on credit, it's hard to make that up with a check that comes a month later.
Yeah.
That's just not the way people's budgets work when we're living in a time
especially
where
during this time of
people
year.
are on
Right.
That and people are living on the margin now
Anyway, right. Here's a real life example. The Coast Guard, the Congress passed the military's budget in the fall, and everyone thought the military was fully funded. The Coast Guard is funded through the Department of Homeland Security. Why that is beyond me. But because the Department of Homeland Security has not been funded yet, the Coast Guard is running out of money tomorrow. And the Coast Guard was not going to get paid tomorrow. Now, they found $75 million somewhere to pay them tomorrow, but after tomorrow, the Coast Guard has no more money. And if this does not end
They threw them a life jacket.
and a blue one at that. If this does not end by January 15th, the Coast Guard, every member of the Coast Guard has to work for no money. If this does not end by January 15th, they will be working for free, and because they're essential.
TSA is already working for no money,
Exactly.
Right, and so because they're
that
essential,
bothers
they
me
have to work.
greatly.
They have to work, and they don't get paid. And they're out saving lives and working and protecting the coast and doing, as Donald Trump says, keeping illegal aliens from coming in the country.
But what happened to Donald Trump's ownership of this shutdown? He was so proud of it, and
Yeah.
he told
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi he would take all the credit for it.
Well,
what has happened to
I'm
that?
sure Fox News told him he couldn't do that, because here's a great quote I found from 2013 when Obama was president and there was that short shutdown. And here's what he said on Fox News when he was interviewed. They asked him about who takes ownership of a shutdown. And Donald Trump said in 2013, if you say who gets fired, it always has to be the top. Trump said on Fox News in 2013, the problem starts from the top, and they have to get it solved from the top. The president is the leader, and he has to get everyone in a room and lead. So he said in 2013 that the president should get fired if there's a shutdown.
Well, it's just amazing the way the media lets him say one thing and do another, and really don't hold him very accountable for it. I guess they've just
Chris,
become.
I disagree. I disagree with that, Chris, because the media has been holding him accountable. All the stories in the last week is how Trump's argument about who owns the shutdown has morphed. And, now it's Nancy Pelosi, then it's the Dems. He is basically trying to change the subject. He likes this shutdown probably because it takes people's mind off the Mueller investigation. But, the media has been doing, I think, a really good job in making sure that they remind people that he owns this shutdown. They show the White House meeting with Pence sitting in a chair like a ventriloquist doll and just sitting there. And
Except
I think
his mouth wasn't
Trump
moving. But yeah, and I think
Right.
I think you're right, James. That was probably too severe of criticism. But it's almost like everything that comes out of his mouth, nobody really takes it seriously. So he doesn't get treated like other presidents. Can you imagine? And I know we talked about this a lot. If Barack Obama had said he was going to own a shutdown and then started blaming other people, people have been like so far up his ass.
Yeah.
It's not even funny.
So before we leave this topic, at the end, right here at the end of the year, aside from the shutdown, the president is dealing with quite a few other things that he created all on his own. The troop pullout from Syria, which caused James Mattis not only to resign, but hit him right on the nose with his resignation letter. And that was just, bang, right on the nose. It was so bad, and the media fallout was so bad. He fired him instead of letting him resign at the end of February, and that still hasn't quelled. But with that Syrian troop pullout, and the president clearly doesn't care, but we have once again, for the second time, left the Kurds out to dry. Come on, we're going to help you. We're going to take care of you. No, you're okay. Turkey, they won't bother you. They're just going to come in and decimate you, but we're not. That's all right. You're fine.
But look who we made happy.
Russia.
Once again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's all good.
Well, I'm just glad, Chris, that Trump had the balls to finally go over and visit the troops after almost 2 years in office or more. And finally going over there and basically trying to act like a commander in chief. But I think
he tried and he failed, James. I mean, he treated it more like a campaign rally than he did. It was all about him.
Well, I'm not gonna criticize. We've criticized him for not going. I'm not going to criticize him for going.
I'm going to criticize him for going and doing the wrong thing.
The message was wrong. And he lied to him, but he at least he went. The thing
that's a low bar.
What killed me about the whole thing?
Chris,
go ahead.
But one of the things I wanted to point out is the dysfunction that this administration has had from day one. And Mattis resigning, John Kelly leaving, shows that there are no more adults in the room. All you have are yes men and women who are basically going to do his bidding. And that's unfortunate because you can see it already in Mulvaney, who's out spinning, trying to make the shutdown about Nancy Pelosi.
That's right.
And not really talking about solutions. And so you have, we should be really worried about going into 2019 because you got so much dysfunction in this White House, and it's getting worse because guys like Mattis and Kelly, who provided some semblance of stability, are gone. And so now he's left to his own devices. And, of course, Ivanka and Jared, who they know everything about government.
I can't wait to read James Mattis's
But I
book.
love what you said about the adults in the room, James, because one of the finest tweets that I saw after Kelly announced that he was leaving was that Scott Baio was one of the people under consideration to replace him.
The final point here on
Well, it wasn't true, but he supports
Happy
him,
days
so
are here,
they just
Dan.
put him on a short list.
the final point here before we move on is the stock market. The president has the thing he views the success of his administration on is that the economy is booming because look at the stock market. And in the month of December, the stock market lost, 20% of its value or 15% of its value in the month of December alone. And the president finally realized that he was causing this by his market manipulation, with the statements he was making, and by his trade wars with China and the whole world, quite frankly. And it finally dawned on him, and that's when he started attacking the chairman of the Fed, which caused further problems with the stock market. It lost 1,000 points in one day last week. When that happens, that's going to cause the GOP to start turning on the president because now his moves are affecting the economy. That's the only thing they had.
Well, I think other moves have already started turning certain segments of the base away from Donald Trump, if you believe what you read. And he was stupid to tie his presidency to the stock market.
That's crazy.
To begin with.
Right.
I mean, the president doesn't control the stock market, but now, since he's bragged about it so much, I guess he has to own it.
The president does not control the stock market, but chaos
Affects it.
affects the
Right.
affects the stock market, and he is a creator of chaos. And what we have now, going back to what James said, is a chaotic White House. We also have a situation where it's really hard to know what's going to happen in 2019 because we're going to have a totally different dynamic with this new Congress. So we have positions unfilled in the White House. For the previous 2 years, Congress was not checking the president. The president was doing whatever
Right.
he wanted. But he had some grown-ups offering at least some bit of guidance. Now there's no guidance, but a new dynamic in Congress, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't know how you can even judge whether this is going to be better or worse or just more chaos.
Well, it's going to be more chaos. There's no question about that. Let's move on.
Well, it was interesting. I make one point about that, Chris. Is if you watch the financial news networks last week, it was interesting watching these pundits talk about why this is happening. And one guy said, we've never had an administration like this where you had so much dysfunction. And before, the market could kind of build in a dysfunction because they were getting a tax cut and it was all good. But what's happened, I think, is that you have the China tariffs. You have so much uncertainty about, what's going to happen in the Middle East,
Right.
what's going to happen with Russia, what's going to happen with this investigation. And, the market can, build in some predictability, but you have so much unpredictability about this administration that now, they're going, wait a minute, we don't know how to deal with this. And so our Republican friends were living it up the first couple of years because the economy was good, employment was low, and all those things were good for, the GOP. But now that seems like a smoke and mirrors, basically, and now the market is reacting, and I don't know if we're at the start of a bear market where you're going to see some adjustments, but you can't be messing with the Fed chair. I mean, nobody's ever called out a Fed chair like
Right.
that. I mean, it's ridiculous, that Trump is saying, well, give me lower interest rates so we can keep money flowing, in the credit markets. That's not how that works. And that's the reason why Fed chairs have always been mysterious men behind the curtain,
Right.
because, they kind of controlled the way things were. But now you have an administration that wants to be involved in everything because what? Trump's a deal maker, and just make a phone call and do a deal.
He's not a deal maker, and that's what we're learning is he has no idea how to actually make a deal. The only way he makes deals, and we're going to move on, but the only way he makes deals is through manipulation and fraud, and that's not a way to make a deal. All right, let's move on. We're not gonna play the tweet game today. We're gonna make our predictions. Each of us is gonna make 4 predictions for 2019. We're gonna keep these predictions, and we're gonna follow them throughout the year of 2019 and see who gets most of them right, and then whoever gets most of their predictions right win a big prize, just like always.
I'm still waiting for my big Twitter win prize. Okay.
All right. So
All right,
who
who's
wants to
gonna
go
go
first?
I'll go first.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I predict that the Democrats, there will be so many Democrats running in the primary for the presidential election that they are going to beat each other down to the point where whoever is the GOP nominee for president will have an unlimited supply of takedown material that they can quote directly from the Democrats. That's prediction 1. Prediction 2, we will have a major recession in 2019. And it is going to be for all the factors that we've mentioned here or there today. Prediction number 3, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court will not overturn Roe v. Wade. And my number 4 prediction is that Trump will either die in office or get off scot-free, leave office. So either way, no consequence
He won't
to all of his
He'll be out of office before the end of the year.
either dead or alive. I feel like I should get bonus points if he dies in office.
I'm not going to say that. Yeah, no. Okay. James, you want to go?
So my first prediction is I think that Donald Trump Jr. will be indicted by the Mueller team or either the Southern District of New York. I think that investigation is closing in on Trump and his finances. And I think that Donald Trump Jr. is going to be, hung out to dry by daddy. My second prediction is that I think that we will have another Supreme Court pick because somebody, one of the justices will get sick and or die, and Trump will have another bite at that apple, unfortunately. My third prediction is that the Houston Astros will win the World Series. And my last prediction, I disagree with one of Andrea's, predictions
Perfect.
about the recession. I think that the economy will come back and the market will come back roaring. So those are my 4 predictions.
Okay, so specifically, you are saying in 2019 we will have a strong economy.
Yes.
Okay, not just that the markets come back, but that a strong economic outlook by the end of 2019.
Yes.
Okay.
You want to go or you want me to go?
Go ahead.
All right. So Chris Tritico's picks. Number 1, Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, will be fired by the end of March as Trump continues to blame him for a slowing economy. Number 2, the Mueller investigation comes to an end, and Mueller indicts Donald J. Trump Jr. and names President Trump as an unindicted co-conspirator in a conspiracy to steal the 2016 election. Number 3, John Roberts steps in as the savior of the Constitution as he becomes the new Kennedy on the U.S. Supreme Court. Number 4, the Senate Republicans cave on a funding bill by the end of January, and Trump claims the lack of wall funding is his victory.
All right. Chris Bell's predictions for 2019, the Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party will become more aggressive, and as a result will become diminished in their ranks and in power. Texas will be deemed a battleground state for 2020 and will start building toward that in 2019. Donald Trump's ties to Russia will be maybe not fully exposed, but greatly exposed as a result of the new Democratic House. And Beto O'Rourke will not run for president, instead opting and announcing that he will run against John Cornyn in 2020.
Oh, that's a big pick. That's a big pick.
I think that it's number 3. Your Trump's ties to Russia will be fully exposed is a little bit of a cheat, since I feel like they have already been fully exposed. I think you're going to have to be a little more specific about that.
Well, I don't
I
think
mean,
they've been fully exposed.
Who does not believe that he has ties? That he does not have ties
But
to
I
Russia?
don't know how deep they go.
You mean you mean
I mean,
through the
how
Mueller
re-
investigation? There's going to be more
Right.
ties through the Mueller investigation.
Well, that
Well-
and I think the International Relations Committee will delve into it. And Adam Schiff has said that they've been blocked in finding out everything.
Okay,
Hey,
but it
Tritico,
is.
can we move on .org?
Can what?
Can we
Okay,
move on .org?
here's the deal. How are we going to know your prediction is true? It is a given that we're going to find out more about this. You have to have. There has to be a.
Are you worried about losing that big prize?
No, well, come on. What's that's so vague.
All right, let's go.
I'm not giving you that one.
2018 in review. For President Trump, 2018 has been a year of perpetual motion. He's presided over a near constant turmoil and increasingly relied on his own instincts. In other words, he's fired everybody that had a brain around him. And reports are that he spends most of his time in the residence of the White House watching Fox News and doesn't really take any advice from anybody. He just makes decisions on the fly. And so what we've done is we have decided that the best way for us to describe last year's, we've picked our own top picks for last year and what we think are the top stories of the year. We're going to go over those right now and talk about them a little bit. I'll go first. I think that my top 3 stories last year for 2018 was in January. They were talking about, oddly enough, immigration. And right after Trump took office, and he said, "Go, you go make a deal. I'll sign it." And they went and made a deal, and Trump said he would sign it. And then he started talking to the Freedom Caucus, and he said, "I'm not signing that deal. All these people coming here from shithole countries. I want people from Norway to come here, and that's who I want to immigrate to this country." And he backed out on a deal that had full funding for the wall. And that's why earlier in the show I said he doesn't care about the wall. He had full funding for the wall in January of this year, and he backed out of that deal because the Freedom Caucus again said you can't sign this deal because you'll look bad.
Well, I did have a neighbor from Norway at one point. He's a lovely gentleman. We're still very good friends.
That's right. But the thing is, this he had the full funding. The Democrats offered him full funding in exchange for DACA, and the Freedom Caucus said, if you do this, you'll look bad. It's not about the wall. It's never been about the wall. We're still dealing with the same issues because every time he gets around doing a deal for this wall, the Freedom Caucus and the conservative pundits say you're going to look like a weenie, and he backs out of it.
Andy, do you think that's okay for Chris to pick that as one of his top stories of 2018? Or do you have a problem with that?
I have already forgotten what he just said. Oh, shithole countries. Yeah, the shithole country. Yeah,
Okay.
All right.
It was all right.
All right.
It was all right.
In May, the Department of Homeland Security, two of mine fall around the immigration. In May, the Department of Homeland Security enacted a zero-tolerance immigration policy causing forced separation of migrant families on the border. Act set the country on a path of downward spiral that has put us on a decline, and in my view, worldwide. And it's going to take us decades to recover from it. The order that we're still dealing with today at the border and still dealing with our with our trading partners. And I think it showed us, I found two quotes that I think are very important that deal with that. It showed us that to the world that we were just a heartless country. Gandhi said, a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. And I think that what it says is America's greatness is certainly in question today. And William Gladstone said, nothing that is morally wrong can be politically right. And I both of those just fit that story better than that. And number three, and James and I think we both picked this. In November, the Democrats won control of the House, picking up 40 seats in the midterm elections. That's, in my view, the single most important event of 2018 is it stopped GOP control of the government and provides some semblance of reason and common sense back in the governance of our country. And I think those three events for me were as important as anything got that last year.
James?
So to kind of piggyback on Chris's last story of the year, I think that the Democrats taking over the Congress, over the House, is a major accomplishment for the Democrats because it shows that they could run to the left and they could pick up swing voters. But I think it also showed how Americans voted against Trump, even though he wasn't in the race, because they realized that he is probably the most reprehensible human being on earth. And they went out to the polls and showed it. And I think you'll see a continuation of that in 2020. But more importantly, as Chris suggested, it's going to bring some balance back to governing in the United States. And the Democrats are going to, hopefully be able to govern and investigate at the same time. But I just hope that they don't overreach with this new power. My second big story was the nomination and confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh as the new Supreme Court justice. I think this is going to have far-reaching consequences, even for Roe v. Wade, Andrea, unless John Roberts or some other conservatives step up to uphold Roe v. Wade. I think that Kavanaugh is going to take the court way to the right, and I think that the fact that that's going to have far-reaching consequences for years to come is just a major story on so many levels. I think also my third pick was the crime bill. That, got some coverage, but it was a bipartisan victory for Trump, unfortunately. He had to send his son-in-law to negotiate it. But I think that's important for so many reasons, mainly because, as an African-American, I see so many African-American men and women and minorities who, given these sentences. And Chris Tritico, as a defense attorney, you see mostly us. And when I say us, a lot of African Americans down there in the court system. But on the federal level, I always thought that the first black president, Bill Clinton, really set us back with that 3 strikes you're out federal sentences, and that this treating crack cocaine differently from powdered cocaine, and the sentencing that resulted from that. And so I think the Democrats and people who believe in criminal justice and social justice didn't get everything they wanted, but at least this is a start, and I think it could, use more tweaks to it. But I think that this was a major deal that kind of went unnoticed, and I think having these guys able to get job training, which is a part of this, will help reduce the recidivism rate. And hopefully you can reunite families because there's so many men who are in prison and their families are just torn apart by this. And so hopefully this will have a positive consequence in communities across America.
It's the most important piece of legislation, criminal law-wise, to come out of Congress in 25 years, and it will have a positive impact. And I actually would have picked it, but I knew you were picking it, so I let you have it. But it couldn't have a stronger impact. And to talk about African Americans, I have to echo what you just said, and not to make light of it, but Richard Pryor, when he went to prison, when he got out, the first show he did, he said, "I learned something about the justice system. It's just us."
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
Exactly right.
I think it's a feeble bill. I think that it's going to do next to nothing. The value in it is that it sets a tone, and we can start talking about it. Excuse me. It's not going to affect that many people. It's where criminal justice reform needs to be is at the state level.
Well, there's a federal system and a state system, and this affects the federal system.
This affects the federal system. I read 2,600 federal inmates will have their sentences reduced as a result of this bill. We have the largest prison population as a percentage of the country's population in the world. I mean, this is.
Well, I think we could do a whole. I think we could do a whole show on crime,
and
that
we should.
We had this mentality during the 80s and 90s that we were going to lock everybody up.
Right.
And just add on and think of more things that could be criminalized. And I think we've seen the failure.
And the reason that this is the most important piece of legislation to come out in 25 years is it's taken that long to start reversing what we did in the 80s.
I don't disagree with you that it's important. I disagree with you that it's.
Andrea, I agree with you, and I think I said that it's a start. It needs tweaking.
Yeah.
For instance, the sentencing is not retroactive. It only affects people who will be sentenced in the future. It doesn't give retroactive relief to guys who are already in prison. So that's one thing. But I think you're right, Chris. It is important in that it started to reverse some of the stuff that happened in the 80s and 90s, and that's the most.
And these are issues
thing.
we've been complaining about since the federal sentencing guidelines were enacted, and so it's extremely important that this bill got passed and signed. Very important.
Okay, and it is important. Yeah. I just don't feel like it's going to have the sweeping effect, and maybe I misunderstood what you said about that.
Well, speaking of crime, I think the biggest story, certainly one of the biggest stories of 2018, was Michael Cohen. And the fact that he was willing to turn on Donald Trump and become a fountain of information. And Donald Trump can cry and whine as much as he won and call him a liar, but I don't think that anybody who watched Michael Cohen's interview with George Stephanopoulos believes that he's the one who's lying. I think he's telling the truth, and I think he will continue to tell the truth, much to the harm of Donald Trump, and thank goodness he flipped. I think another huge story from 2018 that I hope nobody forgets about was the press conference with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin standing together, basically denouncing the intelligence community in the United States and suggesting that he believed the leader of Russia was really such a despicable scene and borderline treasonous, I think, in many respects, and I hope nobody forgets it.
Look, your prediction already came true.
Well,
Russia ties fully exposed.
I'm amazing in that respect. And then my third biggest story, and really I think it's going to continue to resonate through 2019 and years to come, was the tragic shooting at Marjorie Stoneman High School in Florida, and the reaction from that, and what those students were willing to do in the movement they've built through the country, and later in the year of the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C., that took place really all across the country. I think the NRA is doomed. I think people have awakened to the fact that we need reasonable gun control here in the United States, that people don't need AR-15 rifles in order to protect themselves. And it's certainly going to be a huge move in the right direction, and I hope we keep talking about it here on the podcast as well.
Have you gone, Andy? Have you gone?
No.
Okay.
So I think the environment is the biggest story of the century, much less the past year. The science is and scientists are becoming more and more. What am I trying to say? It is becoming more apparent, and the warnings are becoming louder and shriller and more urgent, because I think we have already reached a point where we're not going to be able to bring this back. We're going to have to start learning how to deal with rising sea levels and bigger storms and more natural disasters and the refugee crises that these things will bring. I think the environment is the number one issue. Everything else on the planet pales in comparison. The Me Too movement was huge. The fact that women decided that we need to talk about rape, we need to talk about sexual assault, we need to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace, and how these issues are not a woman's shame, and how they affect our lives, down to how much money we make, what professions we can be in, where we can go, and what time of day we can go, and what we can wear and what we can't wear, and what our daughters can do or can't do. Me Too is huge, and Kavanaugh was an ugly, ugly backlash to that. And the Russia investigation, I think, of course, was the biggest political story of the year.
All right.
And Chris thinks there's more to come.
I do.
There is more to come,
I
but
tend to agree with
I
that.
don't think the ties are in question.
All right, let's move it out of left field. James, you want to go first?
Oh, we need an out of
yeah.
left field too.
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
So, at the beginning of the football season, there was a superintendent in a district north of Houston who basically, talked about Deshaun Watson as a black quarterback, suggested that he wasn't smart enough. The Texans are now on the verge of winning the South Division and the AFC South. And if they lose to Jacksonville tomorrow, at least they'll be a wild card team. So this is what I like to say about predictions and stereotypes. You can't predict the future. Our predictions today were great, but you just can't predict what's going to go on. You just got to take a Donald Trump approach to it and just create chaos. And that's why I am so happy that the Texans are now getting ready to be in the playoff. And I want to ask that superintendent, if he's listening, he's probably not, how do you like the Texans now? Happy New Year, everybody, and I hope 2019 for all of you is healthy and happy.
Well, that superintendent ain't working today, but Deshaun Watson is.
Well, I want to talk about good and evil. We will start with evil. If you haven't seen Vice, do yourself a favor and go see it. It is incredibly well done, and it's also incredibly disturbing. Obviously, it's about Dick Cheney and delves into really his whole life and how he came to be vice president and the incredible evil doing that went on when he was in that role. I won't spoil the movie, just tell you it's well worth your time and dollars to go see it in the theater. And then I would like to talk about good, because we changed our tradition a little bit. Alice and I are usually here in the city for Christmas, but we went to Denver to visit my brother. It was a great trip, and we did not go to the Christmas Eve services like we usually do, but instead went on Christmas Day to the St. John Cathedral in Denver. And the dean of the cathedral, Dean Richard Lawson, gave a Christmas message that was one of the most uplifting Christmas messages I've ever heard. And I don't know why it hit me so hard, but it was because it was incredibly simple. But he talked about growing up in a small town in Alabama that was quite diverse, and at a very young age, learning the power of words and learning how words can do so much to bring people together, but also do so much to tear people apart. And I think those of us who have been gifted with the ability to communicate should always keep that in mind. And I plan to make it a New Year's resolution. Probably not so much on the show, because it's really our duty here on What's Left America to tear people apart. But as far as how I treat others, I certainly plan to keep it in mind. And Happy New Year, everyone.
You ready, Andy?
Are you crying because that was so touching?
That was very touching.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Recycle your Christmas tree. Don't put it out for it to go into the landfill. And also, fun fact, glitter is bad for the environment. It's made of little bitty bits of plastic, and it never goes away.
Why has it become so incredibly popular again?
I don't know. I don't know. But I love glitter, but I'm going to stop using glitter for the environment, for the young
Well,
people.
Andy, all that glitters is not gold.
No, it's toxic waste.
You done?
Do you want more?
No. It just kind of trailed off. I didn't know if you were through. All right, here's my out of left field. This is the last one of the year. I've said all year long that the Democrats should not introduce articles of impeachment for Donald Trump because the Senate, there's no votes in the Senate to remove him. I've been watching the last 3 weeks as the president just digresses and digresses and digresses and drags the country down with him. And it is time for the Republican Party to remove Donald Trump. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the country for the country to have to go through the removal of a president. But Donald Trump is a mentally ill man, and he cannot lead our country, and he's not leading our country. And so it's up to the Republicans for the second time in 48 years to man up, grab themselves by the boys, and say, you have to go. And they have to do it. The Democrats can't do it because it'll be a political fight. But the Republican Party has to do it, and they have to remove Donald Trump, and he has to go. No matter what it does to that party, they have to do it for the country. They have to do it for the good of the United States, because we cannot do this any longer. The country can't take it anymore. Please do the right thing and get rid of this president that you put in there, because he is taking the country down the wrong path, and we can't take it anymore. Hope you have a happy new year. Woo! That's all we have here from What's Left America for 2018. Next year's got to be a good year. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, what do we need to do, Andy?
Subscribe.
And as soon as you pass through puberty, that voice will stop changing. It's all about subscriptions.
Another prediction.
Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. We want to thank Vertical Ascension Entertainment for putting us on YouTube every week, and Keegan DeLay, our in-studio producer. Have a great new year, and we'll see you in 2019.